thinking, that's a legendary guitar riff. But as a beginner, how on earth am I supposed to learn that? Well, let's just take a second to stop the video there. We'll take a closer look and see exactly what is going on. Now, the first thing that you'll notice in my fretting hand, there's actually an amazing finger exercise that utilizes all 4 fingers. Whilst over in my picking hand, we are mastering the art of alternate picking. Now, you stick around to the end of the video. Not only are you going to learn this amazing guitar riff, but I'm also going to show you how to recreate Slash's sound for yourself. So let's get going. So to teach you this riff nice and efficiently, I'm actually going to break it down into 3 different sections. Now, section 1 is going to consist of 3 different positions, and we're going to utilize 1s and 4s and 2 and 4s. So we're going to start with our first finger on the 12th fret of the D string, and our 4th finger is going to be on the 15th fret of the B string. Now we're going to utilize a word association here, so I'm going to choose I like. Now the reason for that will become apparent in a moment, but feel free to use your own word association here. So I'm going to play those 2 notes using that word association, so it's I like 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3, 4. So we play it twice. Now we're going to move on to position 2. Now this one is going to be our 2nd finger on the 14th fret of the D string, and our little finger stays on the 15th fret of that B string. Again, we use exactly the same word association and we play it twice. So we've got I like 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3, 4. Now, if you're a complete beginner, I completely understand that it can be tricky using these different fingers, but it is vital that you do to learn this riff correctly. And I've an incredible finger exercise that really teaches you the fundamentals and gets all 4 fingers moving. So if you're struggling a little bit with the finger movement, check that out. Now we're going to move on to position 3 now. So our first finger goes on the 12th fret of the G string this time, and again, our 4th finger stays planted on that 15th fret of the B string. And same word association, here we go. I like 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3, 4. Now, what happens here is we actually go back to position 1, and we play position 1 again. I like 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3, 4. So it's really important to note that it starts and finishes on position 1. And when you go to play this, I think you play it 3 times in total, but when you go to play it the 2nd time, it starts again on that position 1. So effectively, you play that 4 times on the 2nd and 3rd time round. This will make more sense once you learn the full riff. Let's now try playing that in a looping pattern. We'll go nice and slowly, and we'll just do it a couple of times. So we're going to start with that 1s and 4s, 1st finger, position 1. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3. Position 2. I like 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3. Position 3. I like 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3. Position 1. I like 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3. Start again, and I like 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3. Position 2, and I like 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3. Position 3. I like 2, 3, 4. I like. Back to position 1, and 2, 3, 4. I like 2, 3, 4. Now, if you're a beginner, I can understand this might take a little bit longer to get to grips with. So my advice would be to pause the video here for a bit and really get to grips with using the correct fingers, be strict with it, take it slow. And once you get used to that movement in a constant loop, then we can move on to the next phase. Now, if you have got it, great, or if you're simply impatient and just want to learn the lot, let's move on to section 2. Now, section 2 consists of 2 different notes and 2 different fingers. Sound like a pirate? Don't know why. They are 1s and 3s. Now we're going to place our 3rd finger on the 14th fret of the G string and our 1st finger on the 12th fret of that G string as well. And these are played directly after each one of those positions that we've learned in section 1. Now we're also going to add in another word association here, but more on that in a moment. I just want to demonstrate it first so you understand fully exactly where we're at. So we start with position 1, 3, 4, and again 3, 4, position 2, 3, 4, and again. Now position 3, and again. Back to position 1, 4, and again 3, 4. And at that point it would start, the whole riff would start again for the second and the third time. Now hopefully you picked up there's actually only one finger changing, and that's the first note of each position on each one. The rest of the fingers are staying planted. Hence where the finger exercise comes from. Now we're going to add in a second word association here, and I'm going to use eating. Notice there's 2 syllables, eating. Really important that you get that. You can use your own word association by all means, but just make sure it's just 2 syllables. I'm going to add them together, so I like eating. Okay, so let's try that out nice and slowly. So position 1, we've got I like 3, 4, and again I like 3, 4, and that same word association repeats on each one. So let's try it on position 2 this time. Here we go. I like eating 3, 4, and again I like eating 3, 4. Let's try position 3 now. I like 3, 4. I like eating 3, 4. And then you go back to position 1. Now it's so vital that you are strict with yourself and learn to use the correct fingers when learning this riff. As you can hopefully see, the finger exercise element of it, and that can really help with the fundamentals, how you're utilizing all 4 fingers, gain independence in each finger, but also build the speed and efficiency. Rumour has it as well that Slash used to use this as his own personal finger exercise. He was playing it in the studio, and Axel overheard him one day and asked, "What is that riff?" And he was like, "Oh, I just use it to warm up, like." Or Geordie, like, I don't know where that's coming from. Anyway, this incredible legendary song came out of it, which is awesome. I mean, correct me in the comments down below if I'm wrong. Let me know. I can't confirm that, but pretty cool story if it is. But you can certainly see the finger exercise element in it and how it can help with the fundamentals. Let's try that together nice and slowly. After 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And again. 3, 4, position 2. 3, 4, and again. Position 3. 3, 4, and again. 3, 4, position 1. 3, 4, and again. 3, 4. So spend a little bit of time now perfecting that. Maybe pause the video here if you feel like you need a little bit more time. When you're ready, we'll move on to section 3. For section 3, we're going to be using 3s and 4s. Now our 4th finger is going to be placed on the 15th fret of the high E string, and our 3rd finger is going to be placed on the 14th fret of the G string. So we're going to play 15, then 14, then our little finger, 4th finger, is going to move down to the 14th fret and then finish back on the 14th of the G. So I'll play that again just so you can see what's going on. So we've got 15, 14, 14, 14. And this again gets tagged on after what we've just learned in section 2. So I'm going to put all 3 sections together, starting with just position 1, so you can see exactly where we are at. So we start with position 1, and we've got this. So you can see how we add all those together and we've got the basis of this position that stays, our hand position that stays in this position. And it's just our first finger, well, first note that changes. The rest of it stays exactly where it's at. So let me demonstrate that all the way through using all three positions for you. Again. Position 2. And again. Position 3. And again. And back to position 1. So I'm going to add in a third word association here, and the word I've chosen is chicken nuggets. They're one of my favorite foods and it's easy to remember. I often find the more silly these word associations are, they're actually more useful for learning because they're easier to remember. Feel free to choose your own one. Don't necessarily have to go with mine, but my whole word association phrase for this riff is I like eating chicken nuggets. It just works. So let's go with it. So I'm going to play this nice and slowly for you with that word association. Start with position 1. So we've got I like eating chicken nuggets. And again, I like eating chicken nuggets. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing now, but with position 2. So we've got that second finger on fret 14. Here we go. I like eating chicken nuggets. And again, I like eating chicken nuggets. Now, same thing again over to position 3. I like eating chicken nuggets. I like eating chicken nuggets. And then we go back to position 1 and that whole thing just repeats around. Now hopefully you can see how that's actually an amazing finger exercise for your fretting hand. And we've spoken a lot about the fretting hand, but we haven't actually mentioned the picking hand yet. Now the reason is because I wanted you to learn that full riff with the correct fingers first, so you're comfortable moving around it, so then we can apply our picking technique. Now the picking technique we're going to learn here is the art of alternate picking. This is where we play a downstroke followed by an upstroke. Now this allows us to be much more efficient and faster at playing. So we're going to apply that to the riff now, and we're going to take it nice and slowly. So just with position 1 to show you, and then you can practice this in your own time afterwards. So we've got down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Now it's really important to take note here when you're practicing this, not to dig in your pick too far down. You don't want that because it creates a lot more resistance. You want to have your pick right on the edge here so it creates much less resistance. Now the way I always describe this, if you're running through a field that's like boggy, waterlogged, each step you take, your feet is going to drag down and cause more resistance. Whereas if you're running on tarmac, for example, there's much less resistance, so you can run faster and more efficiently. It's exactly the same that applies to this picking technique. Now there is actually a fourth section that I'm going to show you now, and this is just a nice little transition from the riff into the verse. And this utilizes 1s and 3s and 3 and 4s. Okay, so we start with our first finger on the 12th fret of the high E string, and our third finger, and it's really important to note, stays planted on the 14th fret of the G string. It does not move. Okay, so we're going to go 12, 14, Then we're going to use our fourth finger on the 15th fret of the B string, back to the 14th of the G, then back to the 12 on the high E string, then 14 on the high E string with a fourth finger, back on the 14th with that G string, then 15 on the high E string, 14 on the G string, 14 on the high E string, 14 on the G string, 12 on the high E string, 14 on the G string, 15 on the B string, 14 on the G string, and finish on the 15 on the B string. So notice that this 14th fret on the G string gets played in between each one of the changing notes. So I'm going to try that again a little bit quicker this time, and I won't say the 14 in between each one, just note that it plays that in between each one of the finger changes. So we've got 12, 15 on the B string, back to the 12, 14, 15, 14, 12, 15, and end on that 15. So just take your time to learn all the finger movement for that, and that is the full riff. Now, if you managed to get this far, well done. You've absolutely nailed it. I know it can be really tricky if you're a beginner, especially utilizing all these different fingers, but definitely go and check that finger exercise that I was talking about earlier, because that really will help with all the fundamentals. Now, we're going to talk about how to get Slash's sound. So obviously, there are so many elements as to how Slash gets his sound. Most obviously is being his unique playing style and feel. I completely forgot to mention as well that Slash actually plays his guitar down in E flat tuning. So he detunes each string by a semitone. So although he plays it in the same position that I'm teaching you this riff in, is actually in E flat, not standard tuning of E. So if you play along with the record, it's going to sound awful. So you can either detune your guitar down to E flat, or if you search over Sweet Child of Mine in standard tuning or Sweet Child of Mine in E, I'm sure there'll be plenty of options for you to play along with. Now, I haven't actually got any of Slash's equipment, but the aim of today is just to try and capture just a small essence of that sound. So I'm going to be completely transparent as to what I'm using, and we'll start with the guitar. So Slash famously uses a Gibson Les Paul. I haven't got one of those. I've got a Les Paul copy. It's like a budget sort of Les Paul. I would say it compares to like the sort of Epiphone Les Pauls. Actually, it's a vintage V100, and these are actually great guitars. I think it personally sounds really good. It's completely standard. There's also, like, for this particular one, Slash uses the rhythm pickup for the intro and the solo, I do believe, as well. I have heard that he's kind of switches it up, so a lot of time he uses the rhythm for the sort of solo stuff and the treble for the more rhythm stuff, which is quite an interesting way of playing. But I haven't done my full research on that, so you might want to look into that a bit more. But I do know for this particular riff, he definitely uses the neck pickup for the intro. So as I say, completely standard, nothing exciting there. Now, Slash famously uses Marshall amps. I haven't got a Marshall amp. I'm actually using an old Watkins Westminster. Now, this is like a late 50s 5 watts valve amp. I think it sounds absolutely great. And in my studio, there's sort of noise limitations that I have to be fairly conscious of. So having a lower powered amp means I can crank it a little bit more and get some nice tones, which is why I use that for a lot of my recordings. Now, next up, I've got, obviously I can't get the overdrive tones of a Marshall amp as well. So how I attempt to recreate that, I sort of use, first of all, I stack my overdrive. This is actually an Analog Man King of Tone pedal. amazing, amazing pedal. This, highly recommend these. But basically what I'm using this one for is to just push the amp a little bit, make the valves work a little bit more, so you get that natural crunch of the amplifier. Really works well. Now on top of that is then I stack my distortion. Now the distortion that I'm using is an old Rat pedal. Again, fantastic little pedal, this really good pedal. I haven't got my distortion too high on this. I just want to thicken it up a little bit more. The gain I don't think is too high on that intro. So yeah, you want to be careful with how much you set, but have a little play around with the settings on your distortion pedal and stuff. But I stack this on top of my overdrive, so you get a nice thick sound. And that to me kind of is one thing about the Marshall distortion. It's really thick, warm overdrive, and that just kind of helps to try and recreate that a little bit. Now next up is the all-important reverb. Now I use two different reverbs. I've played around with both of them, and they've both had great results. I started off with the Cathedral reverb, this one here. Fantastic pedal, this as well. Lots of different reverb settings that you can do on this and store. It's got a little memory and stuff. Great pedal. The whole setting is what for me was the most accurate, and I believe the whole reverb is what Slash used. Sounded great, but my go-to reverb, one of my absolute favorite pedals of all time, is the Strymon Flint. I absolutely love this pedal. It's so versatile, has 3 different reverb settings, the 60s, 70s, 80s. I've actually used the 80s one for this setting, but it's like a dual reverb and tremolo pedal. Both sides sound fantastic. It's unbelievable pedal. So that's my go-to reverb and the reverb that I used on this recording. And then finally, the sort of last magic ingredient is actually the Boss GE7 equalizer pedal. This thing for me is a bit of an unsung hero. I absolutely love this pedal as well. And I didn't used to use it much, but then I discovered, like, for things like solos and stuff, pushing the mids is actually what you need to cut through, not necessarily get louder, but to cut through that mix so you're heard. I had a lot of experiences with boost pedals and stuff which I used to press, and it would be so loud on stage, and the rest of the band would all be like, whoa, that's too loud, and instantly sound guys like, that's too loud. And you're not necessarily hearing the solo, it just becomes a bit of a mess. But by boosting the mids, it really helps to cut through that mix. Plus the level on this does just tip it up. It's amazing. So I actually use this as a boost pedal for a lot of my playing as well. It's fantastic for that. But Slash famously pushes those mids, and when you apply that, it does seem to have that magic ingredient, that just a little sparkle that makes it pop in between. So that really works, actually pushing that. You might have this on your amp where you can push the mids and stuff. I haven't. It's a very simple old school amplifier that I've got, but that really I find works. So we're gonna put all this together now on my board and demonstrate it for you, see what it sounds like. I'm going to stack my pedals on top of each other so you can really hear the progress as we work towards recreating the essence of Slash's sound. So I'm just going to start with my clean tone here, and I've got the pickup selector on the neck settings. So quite a nice, natural, crunchy sound, but I want a little bit more from my amp without being able to blast it. So what I'm going to do is actually use one of my overdrive pedals. I'm going to use the Analog Man King of Tone for this. Now, the idea behind this is just going to push the valves a little bit more and just make the amp work a little bit harder. So let's hear that. So you can hear it's got that natural sort of crunch to it. Next, we need a little bit more gain, and I'm going to get that from my distortion pedal, and I'm using an old Rat pedal to create this. Now, I haven't got the distortion set too high because I don't believe his gain settings are actually that high for this one, especially on the intro. So I'm going to stack that on top of the overdrive. So overdrive first, then the distortion. Let's hear what that sounds like. So you can hear we've got much more sustain. It's starting to pop a little bit. We're still not there yet, but we're progressing towards it. So what we're missing next is the reverb. Now I believe he used like a Hall type reverb on this. I'm going to use my Strymon Flint. It's one of my favorite all-time reverb pedals. I've had some good results with the Cathedral reverb on the Hall setting as well, but the Strymon is just my sort of go-to. So I've got this on the 80s setting, and let's add that in. Definitely getting closer, definitely starting to pop a little bit more, but we're still missing something. Now that little something I am going to add to that by using the Boss GE7 equalizer. Now what I'm doing here is using that to push all the mids, and it just, the magic just seems to happen here where it just pops that little bit more. So let's listen to that. That's so much closer. It just naturally pops a little bit more. Nice! It's a really nice sound, that. I love that. Actually, I just want to demonstrate this equalized pedal. So I'll go back to my clean set. Quite a nice little clean amp sound and stuff, but as soon as you add this equalizer in, it just seems to cut through the mix a little bit more. It's not any louder, it's just, the way it's perceived is just cuts through, and it's just really nice and warm to the ears. It's lovely, lovely little pedal, that. So here's an idea. Let's try it on the Strat, see how that sounds. So I've got my trusty old Strat to do a direct comparison now. And we're going to do exactly the same thing again, stack up all the pedals. I'm going to start with my clean tone. So I've got the pickup selector on the next setting, and here's my clean tone. So I also want to point out at this point, I haven't actually changed any of the amp or pedal settings. In an ideal situation, I'd like to set it up for this guitar because they sound very different. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to do a direct comparison. So let's add in a little bit of overdrive now to get that pushing a little bit more. So immediately I can hear it's a little bit thinner sounding. It's I like the tone, but it's definitely thinner and a sort of geared a little bit away from that Les Paul type sound. Let's thicken it up now with a little bit of distortion with my rep pedal. So it's starting to pop a little bit, but again, much sort of thinner sounding. What I am actually going to do is the way my guitar is wired. So when I select it down to the bridge setting and turn my tone all the way down, it's actually wired so the bridge and the neck work in tandem. So it acts almost like a sort of humbucker sound. So let's hear that. That's popping a little bit more, so that's a little bit closer actually. Let's add in that EQ as Yeah, not bad. So let me know what guitar sound you prefer and which one you think is a little bit closer in the comments down below. Now, I really hope you enjoyed that video, you got some value out of it, and you really learnt a lot. Now, I am really trying to grow this channel. I'm really passionate about building it. And if you would like to show your support, there's lots of things you can do, such as go back, watch all the rest of my videos. I've got lots of content on different songs that I teach, techniques that I teach. covers, all kinds of different things. But the best thing that you can really do to help me at this stage is if I can ask you to smash that like button and hit the subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please feel free to share this with anyone that you might think might get value out of it. As ever, you've been watching the Music Halls. I'm KH. Until next time, keep on rocking.